Hello, home coffee roasters. We're going to be roasting on a new coffee roaster, something that I haven't roasted on before, and it has some bumps and twists along the way. This is going to be a very interesting video for the drum roasting people and the hot air roasting people alike, so stick around. All right, thanks for joining me today and welcome to the Virtual Coffee Lab. We are going to be taking a look at the Ikawa Pro roaster. This is not a home roasting device. This is a commercial roasting device that's designed for those that are selling coffee and they want to have a sample roasting device that's going to be able to quickly give them a profile that they can use to test coffees, to sample the coffee, to see if it's worth buying the greens, or to start to figure out how they're going to approach this coffee when they roast it. First, I want to give a shout out to Trevor Graham, who is with Sabbath Coffee Roasters. Sabbath Coffee rules, and you need to check out their unorthodox videos. I'll have a link in the description. They let me borrow this Ikawa Pro 100 sample roaster, and I must say that it is quite a roaster for a home roaster. Take a look at this. This is made out of anodized aluminum. It's very heavy duty, durable, and it's a hot air roaster, but it is a high-tech hot air roaster. This roaster will let you create profiles, and it will follow the profile to a T from beginning to an end. It has a cool down cycle, it has a warm-up cycle, and the warm-up cycle, before you can even roast the coffee, it has to get to the exact charge temperature that you've set and become stable before you can start your roast. And then it'll just do all the work for you. And it'll roast, I've been doing 100 gram batches, but I think the max capacity is 120. So it's not designed to be something that you're going to use at home and roast a bunch of coffee. As a matter of fact, you won't want this coffee roaster at home. Most of you won't, because it's financially a little out of the norm for a home coffee roaster. This unit costs over $5,000. And that's why I'm so thankful that Sabbath Coffee Roasters let me borrow this unit, and I need to get it back to them in one piece. So we're going to get to the video. I did a roast, but first I want to kind of give you the path of where I think this video is going to go. There's really two different things going on here. We're going to be talking about the roaster and how the roaster works and how it performs, but we're also going to be talking about roasting concepts for everybody, whether you're a drum roaster or whether you are a hot air roaster. And we're going to be talking about how air temperatures are read, the information that's provided to us, and what we do with that information, and ultimately how it impacts the cup. We're going to see what happens with this roast and how it impacts the cup, and we'll have a great vantage point because I was able to record both the roasting data, which does not use Artisan. It's its own proprietary app that controls the roaster, and I was able to also record the roast, the color of the coffee change, and just that whole process. So it's pretty cool. So the first thing we need to do is take a profile that already exists, and we need to load that into the Ikawa. So from my mobile phone, I send the profile from the app to the Ikawa. They have a library, and that's one of the features related to the Pro 100 is that Ikawa has an entire library that a community can share roast profiles. We're using a profile here that is 11 minutes long. And a lot of air roasters are going to say, that's too long of a roast. Well, I think I agree with you that that's a long roast. But that's not the point of this video. We're going to be talking about that. But this is an 11-minute profile, and some of the things that happen during this profile we're going to be talking about, and they apply to every home coffee roaster regardless of the device you're roasting on. So we're going to get to that. So I'm going to go ahead and let this run, and we're just now starting to charge the coffee roaster. We have the temperatures that have become stable. I've twisted the dial, dumped the coffee into the roaster, and now you'll see on the display, you'll see all of the data start to come in to the roaster. You'll see temperatures drop. Now, one of the things about this roaster, which is it's interesting and it's going to be a talking point for us, is how this roaster is measuring temperatures. There's a lot of people that have the popper, they have their own homemade roasting devices, a hot air popper with a probe shoved in it, or they're not using a probe. So with this Ikawa, if we can boil it down to its simplest terms, it has a heating device that's underneath the roasting chamber, and a fan is blowing that hot air into the roaster, into the bean mass. That's how most hot air roasters function in a very general sense, and we see that happening here. Watch what's happening to the bean color, by the way. The bean color is already paling. This is 1 minute into the roast, and actually it's a minute and a half into the roast, and it's already called, I've already called yellow on this. So at 1 minute and 30 seconds, this coffee has already gone to yellow. That is crazy fast. That is remarkable, and it attests to the power of this unit with the hot air. It attests to the efficiency of roasting for a hot air roaster. I'm not saying that it's dry all the way through. I have some questions about that, but the outside of the beans were full yellow at 1 minute and 30 seconds. So take a look at the screen here, take a look at this video, and look to the right, and you'll see a probe that is not inside of the bean mass. The probe is on top of the air, on top of the coffee, elevated from it. We see this dip in the temperature down below because this probe is reading room temperature coffee that is being heated up. But originally it was reading the temperature of the roasting environment without the coffee. So the lower line is the bean probe. That is the probe that you see here that's on top of the coffee, and it's reading the air temperature, and we actually have a turning point that we can use for reference if we want to go ahead and do that. The top temperature is the inlet temperature. That inlet temperature is a sensor that is reading the temperature of the air as it goes into the roaster, and we see that that peaks from a lower temperature during the preheat to it being turned on with a slight dip, and then it shoots up because the temperatures are increasing to try to get this coffee to increase overall in temperature, if that makes sense. So you'll see that there's coffee bean movement constantly spinning, and if you watch the center of the coffee mass, you'll notice that there is movement where there's circulation of the bean being pulled down or moved around from the center of the spinning mass. You'll also notice, if you look just really carefully, and I'll put a pointer here on the screen, that there is a piece of metal that is coming in contact with the bean. It's sticking out. So as the bean cyclones, as the bean moves around in a circle, there is a little bit of a ramp that is inside of the top part of the bean mass that is making it bump outward, and I think that that's adding to the agitation of the beans. All right, so now our coffee beans, look at the temperature increase. So we go from this really steep increase in the very beginning on that red line, and basically 1 minute and 30 seconds, that line starts to level out, and then it goes on a very shallow temperature increase. So we went through a very quick dry, 1.5 minutes, and now we're on a very, very shallow temperature increase. And this is happening, as I mentioned, over 11 minutes. So this is a long roast, and in the terms that I'm used to roasting, we have a dry phase, a browning phase, and a development phase. So we've already finished this dry phase in 1.5 minutes. And on a drum roaster, the rules, the suggestions that I have been promoting, that I have learned about as a starting point for coffee roasting, is that when you break your roast into these 3 segments, the dry phase, the browning phase, and the development phase. We want half of our roast time to be devoted towards the dry phase. So if we have a 10-minute roast, 5 minutes of that roast is going to be in the dry phase. When does the dry phase end? When the coffee turns yellow. Now, on a drum roaster, traditionally, it's going to take a little while longer to get those temperatures up high enough where we can dry the coffee in that period of time without causing roasting defects. With an air roaster, it's a little bit of a mystery. It does roast more efficiently, much more efficiently than a drum roaster will, but a minute and a half it just seems way too quick for me. And we'll talk more about that. But from the point of dry until first crack, that is the browning phase. And this period of time is where the flavor development, as far as like the reactions go for acidity, when it reaches dry, the internal temperature now is warm enough where the reactions, the molecular structure of the bean itself starts to change. It starts to change, and you start to get flavor developments. So that's where you get the fruitiness in coffee when you have coffees that have those flavor notes in them. We also have caramelization that is starting to take place during this process, where the sugar molecules are starting to multiply here, and the coffee is browning. And so the browning is the visible understanding that the bean molecular structure is changing, and now those are the different flavors that are being developed. How long that period of time lasts will determine how your coffee tastes. Also, from first crack till you drop the coffee, that impacts how your coffee is going to taste as well. We call that the development phase, and that phase is primarily designed to continue with caramelization for sweetness, and also to be able to balance the cup. If we were to drop the coffee right at first crack, we would have a lot of the acidity, but we wouldn't have a lot of the balance with the sweetness that so many of us enjoy in our coffee. So here we have a very shallow temperature increase, and at 9 minutes, we're at 382 degrees. I can't even hear. I think I heard one crack or maybe two. It was so slow creeping into this temperature range of first crack that first crack we did not hear a rolling first crack. It was just silence as far as that goes. You can hear for yourself. So you can see the temperature increase now. The inlet temperature has started to go upward. It's had a continuing upward trend in little steps. That's the temperature that's increasing. This white line that just appeared is my rate of rise. They've got a rate of rise calculation. You can just hit the ROR button, which you can see is white there, and you can see the rate of rise. And it's very, very gradual, if anything. It's just a very minimal heat increase over this long roast. So my thought when I was roasting this was, well, this coffee is going to be kind of flat. It's not going to be exciting. It's not going to have a lot of great flavors in it because I'm kind of just browning the coffee. I'm browning the beans, and I'm not going to be happy with the way that this tastes. At least that's what I thought when I saw this roast going on. All right, we are now past first crack, according to Ikawa and the cracking that I heard. And at 11 minutes and 4 seconds or something like that, this coffee is going to go into the cool mode. So the roaster has a cool mode. The coffee stays in the roaster. The fan starts to bring ambient room temperature and blow it into the roaster, and it cools really quick. And so you're going to see that happen here in just a minute. What I'm hoping to do is have a traditional roast with the Ikawa where I take my phases and I might have a 40% dry, a 35% browning phase, and a 20%, 15-20% development phase, and see how that tastes. So I'm roasting a Guatemalan Huehue coffee here. I roast this coffee all the time. You guys have seen me roast this here on the channel. and I know what I can get from this coffee. I know how it's going to taste. I know the acidity range that it has, and I know its capabilities and its limits when I roast this coffee. It is very forgiving when it comes to roasting defects. All right, so you can see here that the roaster is in the cool mode. The temperatures are dropping quickly, and in a minute this roaster is going to stop. And then what I do, and I'll show you, is I'm going to evacuate the coffee from the roaster. It's kind of a neat system the way that this works. So first, chaff is being collected. You'll notice you don't see any chaff floating around. Chaff is being collected in the dispensing receptacle, which you're going to see. I'm going to take that out. It's a glass jar, and I'm going to put another glass jar back in that is going to capture the beans for me. And so we'll get to that here in just a second. We ended up with an ending roast temperature of 394 degrees. Normally when I'm roasting the Huawei coffee on a drum roaster, I drop the coffee anywhere from 398 to 401 degrees. This is usually the range that I'm dropping this coffee, depending upon who I'm roasting it for, whether it's for my family or for myself. So this is definitely on the lighter side, but again, it's an 11-minute roast, and the temperature increase was so slow that I can't see how this is going to be an exciting cup of coffee. All right. The roaster has now started it's stopped spinning. It's cooled down enough where I can go ahead and remove the chaff, and you'll see that here as I look at this roaster. You'll see this glass jar down below. By the way, the roaster light indicates that the roast is complete. I went ahead and grabbed the jar, dumped out the chaff, replaced it with the empty jar, and I pressed the bottom button, and immediately the fan kicks on and it blows out the coffee into this container here. That's pretty cool. I thought that was really kind of a neat feature for the roaster. And here we are. This is what the coffee looks like. Color looks pretty good. And by the way, this is an important point. I've seen so many posts where somebody says, "Hey, here are my beans. How do they look?" And that's not going to tell somebody how that coffee tastes. That's going to tell you if you have roasting defects. That may tell you generally the roasting temperature that you ended at, but it's not going to tell you how the coffee tastes. So if somebody says to you, "Hey, here, take a look at this coffee. How did I do?" You can only give them so much information, but you can't taste the coffee. And that's what I ended up doing. I've tasted this coffee, and truthfully, it was just as I suspected. It was not exciting. It was kind of flat, and there was definitely some papery taste going on. Very little sweetness in the cup, and no real acidity at all. There was a little bit of bitterness, but yeah, so the coffee didn't taste good, and that's not the fault of the roaster. That is the fault of the profile, at least the profile that I used here. But I did this profile for a couple of reasons. One, it seemed interesting to me. Two, the person that created the profile, that was one of the ones in the library, actually touted how great the profile was, and you know what? It may have been for them. I don't know what coffee they roasted, and there's all kinds of different variables that could have caused this. But I use this Guatemalan Huawei coffee that I roast all the time. I'm going to be using it on a couple more future roasts with this to show you, and we're going to be creating a profile together and then roasting the coffee and tasting it. We're going to be doing that next week. I'm kind of looking forward to that. That's going to be really cool. So what do I have to say about the Ikawa roaster so far? It is a quality piece of equipment. It does exactly what it says it's going to do. It is pretty ingenious, and I can see how a company that needs to create a couple different profiles that they use all the time to gauge a coffee to determine either how to roast it or whether it's worth buying, I think that this is a great tool. This roaster costs over $5,000. That is a lot of money, and for an outfit that's roasting a lot of coffee, then this might be worth every penny of that. I mean, imagine being able to time and time again with the push of a button, batch after batch after batch. There's no cooling period. You just batch after batch after batch. You can start this, and you can do a lot of cupping with this coffee. So again, I'm not here to judge whether this is a good roaster or not. There are so many different types of coffee roasters that all of us use. This is an exciting opportunity to try something different, but it's also a great opportunity to say, hey, let's create a couple different profiles and see how that impacts the coffee. And we're going to be talking about that at least one more video, maybe two, and see where this takes us. So if you've had experience with an Ikawa Pro Series 100 or a 50 coffee roaster and you want to share some comments, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. If you are a hot air roasting person and you want to share your perfect profile on how you are roasting, share the temperatures, share the times, and the type of coffee that you're roasting, and also the batch size too. I'd be interested in hearing that, and I'm going to consider maybe using one of the profiles that's shared in the comments and see what that tastes like and how that goes. And I'm also going to be going for what you and I have been talking about for the last couple of years. When we start to roast coffee, where do we begin? How do we learn how the time over temperature impacts our flavors? And we're going to do this. So thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it. If you've enjoyed this content, please hit the like button. Everybody hit the like button now. That would be awesome. I really appreciate that. Also, if you aren't subscribed to my channel, that really helps me out and helps the channel out as it grows. Thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you watching this video, and we'll see you the next time here at the Virtual Coffee Lab.